The corrupt real estate tycoon of Willow Creek thought his wealth made him untouchable. That night, his drunken rage turned cruel. He struck his maid, Maya, and smashed a bottle over her loyal dog, Rusty, when it tried to protect her. The animal fell, and the tycoon laughed, believing no one would dare stop him. He was wrong. Watching from across the lake was Logan Reed, a Navy SEAL hardened by war. And tonight, he was about to cross that fence to deliver justice that money could never buy. Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe to my channel and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Your support truly means the world to us. The air in Willow Creek was heavy with heat and stillness, the surface of the lake glinting under the harsh Tennessee sun. The small wooden cabin at the water's edge had stood empty for years. Until that morning when Logan Reed, a 35-year-old Navy SEAL recently discharged from service, carried his few belongings inside. He had chosen this remote town to escape the noise that lived inside his head, the gunfire, the shouting, the explosions that never seemed to fade. Across the narrow road from his cabin stood a mansion of glass and stone, sleek, cold, and out of place in the sleepy lakeside town. It belonged to Raymond Doyle, the ruthless chairman of Doyle Industries, the largest construction empire in Tennessee. Doyle was in his mid-50s, tall and broad, with silver hair that gleamed like steel and eyes as pale as winter ice. To the outside world, he was a symbol of power and success. To those who worked under him, he was known for his temper and cruelty. From his porch, Logan sipped black coffee, trying to let the quiet sink in. But his attention was drawn to movement across the fence. A young woman was cutting grass under the blazing sun. Maya Collins, slender and soft-spoken, wore a faded long-sleeved shirt despite the heat, as if trying to hide from the world. Her face was pale, her dark hair tied loosely behind her neck, and her steps were careful, the kind of carefulness that came from fear, not clumsiness. Beside her moved a dog, Rusty, a mixed German shepherd, large but limping slightly on one hind leg. His fur was a mottled gray and tan, his eyes deep amber and watchful. Every time Maya shifted position, Rusty's gaze followed, as if guarding her from something unseen. Logan studied the pair for a moment longer than he meant to. There was something hauntingly familiar in that quiet obedience, the silence of people and animals who had learned that making noise only brought pain. Then suddenly the sound came. A sharp crack of breaking glass, followed by a man's angry roar. Logan's head jerked up. Across the fence, the mansion seemed to hold its breath. The shout came again, low and slurred with alcohol, echoing through the still air. Rusty barked once, short and defensive, and Maya froze where she stood. Logan's grip tightened around the cup in his hand until the ceramic creaked. His body reacted before his mind caught up, muscles tense, breathing shallow, senses awake. It was the reflex of a soldier who'd heard too many cries before violence. He looked toward the mansion, its wide glass windows gleaming like mirrors, reflecting sunlight but revealing nothing inside. He stood there for a long moment, unmoving, listening to the silence that followed. Somewhere in that house, behind those clean, perfect walls, something ugly was happening, something that had nothing to do with him, yet reached across the fence and gripped him by the throat. Logan exhaled slowly, set down his cup, and turned his gaze back toward the shimmering water. But even as the lake rippled under the afternoon wind, his thoughts stayed fixed on the mansion across the road, and on the faint broken sound that had shattered the stillness of Willow Creek. The next morning came with the dull light of an overcast sky, clouds hanging low over the still water of Willow Creek. The mansion across the lake looked quiet again, too quiet. From his porch, Logan Reed watched as the young maid moved about the yard, her steps slower than the day before. Maya Collins was cutting branches near the garden wall, her long-sleeved shirt damp with sweat. She worked carefully, never once glancing toward the house, as though even the walls could be watching her. Her movements were graceful but cautious, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping monster. Inside the mansion, Raymond Doyle sat in his office, surrounded by dark wood and liquor bottles, the remnants of last night's rage still scattered on the floor. His face, once handsome in his youth, had hardened into deep lines of arrogance and contempt. His silver hair was slicked back, his tie hanging loose around his thick neck. He was a man consumed by control over his company, his reputation, and the people unfortunate enough to live under his roof. His temper had worsened after the death of his wife, who many said had been the only person capable of softening him. Without her, his grief turned to anger, and his anger sought victims. Logan tried to push away the thoughts of what he'd heard the previous day, but his mind refused to let go. His life after the Navy had been a quiet battle, not with enemies, but with his own memories. At night, he still woke in sweat, the echo of explosions ringing in his ears. He'd found small rituals to cope, sanding the hull of an old wooden boat he had rescued from a scrapyard, jotting down fragments of his past in a weathered notebook, taking long walks by the lake until the moon rose. He wanted to believe he could still build something new from the wreckage, even if that something was just a boat that might never sail. Late in the afternoon, the sound of rustling drew his attention. From the corner of his eye, Logan saw a movement by the fence. Rusty, the dog, was limping toward him, the tall grass parting under his paws. The animal's breathing was uneven, its gait uneven on the injured hind leg. Rusty's coat, a rough blend of gray and tan, was matted around his neck, where the fur looked thinner, revealing a pale scar that ran deep into the skin. When Logan crouched down, the dog froze for a second, then inched closer, sniffing his hand before resting its head near his knee. "You're not supposed to be here, buddy," Logan said quietly, reaching to check the old scar. The mark was jagged and old, healed without care. Whoever had done this hadn't meant to wound by accident. His stomach tightened with unease. Rusty's eyes, a shade of amber that caught the fading light, stared at him, alert, weary, but trusting in a way that made his chest ache. He had seen that look before, in the eyes of soldiers who had endured too much, yet still hoped someone might pull them out of the fire. A moment later, Maya's voice broke the silence. "Rusty, come here!" she called from the other side of the fence. When she appeared, she looked even smaller up close, her pale face drawn, and her lips cracked from the sun. She stopped when she saw Logan, embarrassment flickering across her expression. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "He doesn't usually wander off." Logan shook his head. "He's fine. Looks like he just needed a break." He hesitated, then added, "That scar on his neck, it's old, isn't it?" Maya's eyes darted away, her hand tightening around the leash. "Yes," she murmured, voice low. "He got hurt before I found him. It never healed right." The lie was thin, trembling on her lips. Logan didn't press. He'd learned in the Navy that sometimes silence earned more truth than interrogation. Maya knelt beside Rusty, her fingers brushing over the old wound as if to shield it. The dog leaned against her leg, protective even in pain. "He's all I have," she said softly, half to herself. "He doesn't leave me, no matter what." Logan watched her for a long moment, noting the way her shoulders curved inward, like she was trying to make herself smaller than she was. He understood that instinct, the one that made you hide when the world had already hit you too many times. After she led Rusty away, Logan sat back on the porch steps, running his hands through his short hair. He told himself again that this wasn't his problem, that getting involved could only bring trouble. Yet the image of Maya's downcast eyes and Rusty's scarred neck refused to leave his mind. He had seen too many people who suffered quietly, hoping someone would notice. And too often, no one did. As the sun dipped below the trees, a low rumble of thunder echoed over the lake. Logan stood and looked toward the mansion. The windows glowed faintly under the stormlight, like watchful eyes in the dusk. Somewhere inside that house, a glass shattered again, faint, distant, but unmistakable. Rusty barked once in reply, his voice carrying across the lake before being swallowed by the wind. And for the first time since leaving the Navy, Logan felt the familiar burn of adrenaline rising through him. Not from fear, but from the certainty that this peace he'd sought was about to end. Night fell heavy over Willow Creek, wrapping the lake in mist as rain poured in silver lines. The storm that had grumbled since afternoon finally broke. Logan Reed sat by the window, the lamplight soft against his tired face, hands still from sanding the hull of his half-built boat. The thunder outside seemed to echo the thought he couldn't silence. Something was wrong in that mansion across the lake. Then came the crash, sharp and violent, followed by the unmistakable scream of a woman. Logan reacted on instinct. He snatched up his flashlight and sprinted through the storm, boots splashing in the mud. The mansion loomed like a dark giant, its windows glowing dimly. From the backyard came a deep bark and a man's furious voice, thick with alcohol. "Useless animal!" The beam of Logan's flashlight cut through the rain and froze on a scene that made his blood run cold. Raymond Doyle, soaked and staggering, held a broken bottle in one hand, his face twisted with rage. At his feet lay Rusty, bleeding, trembling, his amber eyes clouded with pain. Maya Collins crouched beside him, shielding the dog with her small frame, pleading through her tears. Doyle's arm rose again, and that was when Logan moved. "Hey!" His voice tore through the storm. Doyle turned, his glare meeting Logan's with drunken fury. "Who the hell?" was all he managed before Logan's fist crashed into his jaw. The sound cracked through the rain like a gunshot. Doyle collapsed, whiskey spilling into the dirt. For a long heartbeat, the world went still. Only rain and Rusty's labored breathing filled the night. Logan knelt beside Maya. "We need to go? Now?" She froze, staring at Doyle's unconscious body. "But he'll wake up," Logan said flatly, "and when he does, he'll come for you." Within minutes they were running through the rain, Maya clutching Rusty wrapped in a torn blanket. The old Ford truck roared to life as lightning lit the sky. Water streamed across the windshield as they sped away from Willow Creek, tires hissing against wet asphalt. Maya's voice was barely audible. "You shouldn't have helped me. He'll find us." Logan's eyes stayed on the road, the scar on his temple catching the light. "Let him try," he muttered. Hours passed as they wound through mountain roads, the storm slowly softening into mist. Pines loomed on either side like silent guards. Then, faint through the fog, appeared the glow of a cabin. "We're here," Logan said quietly. "Grace will help him." Dr. Grace Miller stepped out onto the porch, tall and slender, her auburn hair tied back, wearing a worn flannel and jeans. At 42, she carried the calm of someone who had faced chaos and survived it. A former Navy medic, she had once patched up soldiers beside Logan under enemy fire. Her gray-green eyes, sharp yet kind, took in the scene at once. "Logan Reed," she said with a tired half-smile. "You always did have a talent for trouble." Her gaze fell to the bleeding dog in Maya's arms. "Bring him in, quickly." Inside, the cabin smelled of antiseptic and pine. Grace cleared a table, spreading clean towels. "Tell me what happened." "He was hit with glass," Logan replied. "Lost blood, bad cut to the neck." Grace nodded, already focused, her steady hands working with quiet precision. "He's lucky," she said. "Half an inch deeper, and he wouldn't be." Maya stood nearby, eyes wide, fingers trembling. Grace looked up and offered a faint, reassuring smile. He'll live. When Rusty was finally bandaged and resting, the air in the cabin eased. Grace poured black coffee for the two humans who looked like they hadn't breathed in hours. "You planning to tell me who did that?" she asked. Logan stared out the rain-streaked window. "Raymond Doyle." Grace's expression hardened. "That man owns half the county," she said. "You just picked a fight with the wrong god." Logan looked back, voice quiet but certain. "Then we'll deal with him like one." Outside, the rain had stopped. Only the whisper of wind moved through the pines. Maya sat beside Rusty, stroking his fur as he slept, her shoulders trembling, not from fear this time, but from the release of it. For the first time in years, she let herself breathe. Logan stood by the door, staring into the dark beyond the porch, the soldier in him awake again. Somewhere far below, in the valley lights of Willow Creek, he knew Raymond Doyle would soon wake, and the hunt would begin. The Smoky Mountains greeted dawn with a pale, misty silence. The storm had passed, leaving the air heavy with the scent of wet pine and smoke from the cabin's fireplace. Inside, Dr. Grace Miller was bent over the table, her sleeves rolled up and eyes sharp with focus. Rusty, the wounded dog, lay stretched out under a thin light, his breathing shallow but steady. Grace's gloved hands moved with calm precision as she stitched the wound near his neck, her voice low and reassuring. Years in war zones had trained her to work through exhaustion, to block out fear and noise until all that remained was the patient before her. At the other end of the small cabin, Maya Collins sat wrapped in a blanket, her fingers gripping the edge of her cup. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. Beside her, Logan Reed knelt by the fireplace, feeding the flames. He had cleaned the mud and rain from his clothes, but the shadows under his eyes told their own story. When he turned to look at her, his voice softened. "You should rest. You've been through hell." She shook her head slowly. "I can't," she murmured. "Every time I close my eyes, I see him." Logan didn't ask who she meant. He already knew. Grace finished the last stitch and exhaled quietly. "He's lucky," she said. "Strong heart. He'll make it." Her gaze shifted to Maya, who gave a faint nod, her hand instinctively reaching toward Rusty's paw. Grace straightened up, wiping her hands with a towel. "You two need to lay low for a while," she advised. "Doyle's the kind of man who doesn't forgive humiliation. He'll use every favor, every contact to find you." Logan met her eyes with a grim nod. "I know. That's why we can't just hide. We need proof." The word hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. Later that morning, as Rusty rested and Grace brewed coffee, Maya sat across from Logan at the table. Her voice trembled as she began to speak. "I wasn't the first," she said. "There were others, girls who worked for him before me. He hurt them, made them disappear." She hesitated, her hand tightening on the cup. "Ellie, she was the last one before me. One day she just vanished. They said she left, but she never would have left her dog. He was found dead near the garden wall." Logan listened in silence, jaw tightening. His instincts screamed that Doyle's cruelty ran deeper than anyone in Willow Creek dared to admit. Grace stood by the window, watching the tree line outside. "If we want this to mean something," she said, "we need to get this story out." She crossed to the table, pulling out an old notebook and scribbling down a name. "Mark Benson," she said. "Investigative journalist, Knoxville. He exposed Doyle's company 3 years ago for embezzlement. Nearly lost his job because of it." Grace's lips tightened. "If anyone can bring this to light, it's him." Logan nodded slowly. "You can trust him?" "With my life," Grace said. "He's stubborn, hates corruption more than he loves money." By late afternoon, the fog outside thickened, wrapping the cabin in a hushed gray. Logan set up his small camcorder on the table, its blinking red light the only brightness in the dim room. Maya sat in front of it, her posture tense but determined. Her voice trembled as she recounted her time in Doyle's mansion, the shouting, the broken glass, the long silences between bursts of rage. She spoke of Ellie, of nights spent awake listening to footsteps outside her door. Grace watched from the corner, her expression grave. Logan kept his focus on the camera, his fingers steady despite the memory it stirred. Of recording evidence in war zones, of faces lit by firelight just before dawn. Halfway through the recording, a low growl broke the silence. Rusty, still weak, had lifted his head, ears twitching toward the window. The air seemed to shift, heavy and cold. Logan froze, instinct snapping into place. His hand slid toward the pistol at his belt. The dog growled again, deeper this time, staring into the shadows beyond the glass. Grace moved to the window but saw nothing. "Probably a deer," she whispered. Logan shook his head, voice low. "No, that's not it." The next sound was faint, the crack of a twig, close, deliberate. Logan rose silently, his movements smooth, trained. He flicked the safety off his gun and gestured for Maya to stay behind him. "Lights off," he mouthed to Grace. The cabin dimmed to the soft glow of the fireplace, their breaths the only sound. Rusty whimpered, eyes fixed on the door. Logan's heart pounded, the familiar rhythm of tension coursing through him. Outside, the forest seemed to hold its breath, and then came another sound, boots sinking into wet earth, slow and careful. Whoever it was, they knew how to move in silence. Logan edged toward the window, keeping his gun low. For a moment, lightning flared beyond the trees, illuminating a brief silhouette, tall, broad-shouldered, and unmistakably human. Someone was out there, closing in. Logan's pulse quickened, his body tightening like a coiled spring. He had seen this pattern before. The calm before an ambush. He turned his head slightly toward Grace and Maya, voice barely above a whisper. "Someone found us." In Willow Creek, morning broke, beneath a haze of flashing cameras and news vans crowding the Doyle estate. The mansion stood like a wounded beast, elegant but cracked, its marble steps lined with reporters. At the top stood Raymond Doyle, perfectly groomed in his tailored suit, the bruise on his jaw the only hint of the chaos that had humiliated him. His voice was smooth, practiced, every word calculated. "My employee, Maya Collins, has been abducted by a mentally unstable war veteran, Logan Reed." His tone carried false grief, masking vengeance. When a reporter questioned his claim, Doyle smirked. $75,000, he said coldly, for their return, dead or alive. Among the onlookers stood Vince Harper, a broad, scarred man in a leather jacket, watching in silence. Mid-40s, thickly built, beard streaked with gray, his eyes were the kind that had seen too much and felt too little. Once a soldier in Afghanistan, now a mercenary for hire, he was known for one thing: efficiency. Doyle called him forward. "Find them before the police do," he ordered. "No headlines, no witnesses, just results." Vince nodded once, his gravelly voice calm. Understood. He turned away, already calculating routes and men. Doyle's expression hardened. This isn't about money anymore. It's about reputation. Far north, the Smoky Mountains lay under a veil of cold fog. The forest whispered softly, a place of hiding and ghosts. Inside the wooden cabin, Maya Collins stood awkwardly with a can of pepper spray in her hand, while Logan Reed watched patiently. "Point, breathe, aim for the eyes," he instructed. The days of running had turned into lessons, small rituals of survival. "You're not a soldier," he said, "but you need to think like one. Out here, knowledge is defense." Maya hesitated. "I don't want to hurt anyone." Logan's gaze softened. "Then learn fast, so you won't have to." Outside, Dr. Grace Miller scanned the misty horizon through binoculars, her auburn braid damp against her jacket. "We can't stay," she murmured as Logan joined her. "If Doyle's tracking, he'll find us through tire prints or heat scans." Logan nodded grimly. "We'll move north at dusk. I'll wipe our trail." Grace studied him for a moment. "You think Doyle will stop?" Logan gave a humorless smile. "Men like him never stop until they lose everything." As dusk fell, the woods came alive with a low hum of insects and wind. Rusty, still limping but proud, stayed close to Maya, his fur glinting orange in the firelight. She whispered to him softly, cleaning his bandage. "You're stronger than me," she said. Rusty pressed his muzzle to her hand in quiet answer. From where he sat, Logan watched, something unspoken passing over his face, a flicker of warmth quickly buried under the habit of vigilance. For a fleeting moment it felt like peace. But peace, he knew, never lasted long. Then came a faint buzzing. Rusty's ears pricked up first. Logan's hand went for the lantern, snuffing it out. The sound grew louder, mechanical, rhythmic. He stepped outside and tilted his head up. A black drone hovered between the trees, its red light blinking like a tiny heart. Logan ducked under the truck, his fingers brushing mud and metal until they found it, a small rectangular tracker magnetized to the frame. Military grade. Cold dread settled in his gut. He pried it off, rising to his feet. "They've found us," he said quietly when Maya appeared at the doorway. Grace reached for the radio, but Logan shook his head. "No signals? They'll trace it." Without another word, he threw the tracker into the campfire. Sparks flared, hissing as the metal burst. "Pack what you can carry," he ordered. Rusty growled, pacing near the door, hackles raised. The night trembled with tension. Then came the thunder, not from the sky, but from the valley below. Engines, heavy, deliberate. Down the mountain road, through the fog, Vince Harper's convoy crept closer, jeeps with lights dimmed, rifles gleaming. Vince sat in front, radio in hand. "Thermal ping confirmed," he said into the headset. "2 adults, 1 canine, moving soon." Doyle's voice came through, smooth and venomous. "Bring them home, Harper. Make sure they never speak again." Logan climbed into the driver's seat, jaw tight. "Hold on," he muttered. The engine roared to life, tires digging into the mud. As the first beams of headlights pierced through the trees, the truck shot forward into darkness. Behind them, gunfire shattered the stillness of the mountain night. The hunt had begun. The wind cut through the trees like a whispering blade, cold and sharp under the ghostly moonlight. In the clearing near the cabin, Logan Reed moved with methodical precision, setting traps and checking his gear. His face was drawn tight, the lines of fatigue blending with focus. The forest, usually alive with night creatures, felt unnaturally still. Every creak of the pines sounded too close, too deliberate. He knelt beside a stump, laying out a hunting knife, a flashlight, and a small pouch of signal flares. Behind him, the faint glow from the cabin window cast a fragile warmth against the dark. Inside, Maya Collins and Dr. Grace Miller were packing what they could carry. Grace's movements were quick but quiet. She tied her auburn hair into a knot, her calm expression hiding the worry she carried. "You're bleeding again," she said softly, noticing the scrape on Logan's arm from earlier. "I'll manage," he muttered, loading the last magazine into his sidearm. Grace placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "You can't fight an army, Logan." His reply was a steady breath through clenched teeth. "I don't need to fight an army. I just need to buy us time." In the dim corner of the cabin, Rusty lay beside Maya, alert despite the pain in his leg. His golden brown eyes tracked every sound from outside. Maya knelt beside him, whispering, "Stay with me, okay?" Her voice trembled as she adjusted the sling bag on her shoulder. Her thin frame looked even smaller under the military jacket Logan had lent her. Fear clung to her like a shadow, but there was something new in her eyes now. Defiance. She had spent too long being silent. Tonight, she was done hiding. The first sign of danger came with the distant hum of engines. Logan stepped outside, boots sinking into the cold earth. He scanned the tree line. Then the faint glimmer of headlights cut through the mist, moving slow, deliberate. "They're here," he murmured. Grace peered from the doorway, jaw set. "How many?" Logan's voice was calm. "Enough?" He motioned for them to kill the lights inside. Maya doused the lantern as Logan crouched behind a fallen log, gun ready. The world narrowed to sound, rustling branches, the soft metallic click of weapons being readied. From the slope above, Vince Harper raised his binoculars. The ex-mercenary's breath misted in the cold air. "There," he growled, spotting the faint flicker from the cabin's chimney. His second-in-command, Cole Anders, a lean man with a scar across his cheek, crouched beside him. "Orders?" Vince's answer was curt. "Sweep wide. 2 on the left, 3 with me. No stray shots. Doyle wants them quiet." Cole nodded, signaling his men forward. The group moved like shadows, their rifles low, boots muffled by wet leaves. The first trap snapped. A hidden wire pulled tight, launching a cluster of noise grenades that erupted in blinding light and thunder. Chaos broke the silence. One mercenary went down screaming, clutching his leg. Another fired blindly into the dark. Logan moved fast, flanking from the right, his pistol silenced, each shot clean and controlled. 2 men dropped before the others realized they were under counterattack. Rusty barked sharply. A warning. Maya ducked low behind a tree as a bullet shattered the bark above her head. Vince cursed, switching to a thermal scope. "He's trained," he muttered. "This isn't some vet hiding in the woods. He knows how to fight back." He signaled Cole to circle right, but before they could reposition, Rusty burst from the shadows, teeth flashing. The dog clamped down on one attacker's arm, dragging him to the ground. "Get it off me!" the man screamed. Maya, heart pounding, snatched the fallen rifle and aimed, her hands shaking. The flash lit her face pale as snow. The shot missed, but it bought Logan the second he needed. He tackled another mercenary from behind, slamming him into a tree trunk. Then came a voice that froze the air. "Enough!" Raymond Doyle stepped out from the darkness, flanked by the beam of a flashlight. He looked out of place amid the mud and pine, his expensive coat soaked, his face flushed with fury. A pistol gleamed in his hand. "You can't hide from me, Reed," he shouted. "You think you're saving her? You've ruined everything." He raised his weapon. Logan turned, shoving Maya down as the shot rang out. Pain exploded through his shoulder. He hit the ground hard, teeth clenched against the burn. Rusty lunged with a guttural snarl, sinking his teeth into Doyle's wrist. The gun clattered into the mud. Doyle howled, kicking at the dog, but Rusty held firm until Logan pulled himself to his knees, seizing the moment. With one last surge, he grabbed Doyle by the collar and drove him backward into the dirt. The Tycoon's polished mask cracked, fear replacing arrogance. "You're done," Logan hissed. "You just don't know it yet." The forest suddenly blazed with white light. Helicopter rotors thundered overhead, washing the scene in blinding beams. Shouts echoed through the clearing. "Federal agents, drop your weapons!" Men in tactical gear emerged from the shadows, rifles raised. The insignia gleamed on their vests. FBI. Grace stumbled out from the cabin, shielding her eyes as wind whipped through her hair. "They got the footage," she shouted over the roar. "Mark sent it. It's out." Doyle froze as agents surrounded him, hands raised in disbelief. Vince Harper dropped his rifle slowly, his jaw tight. Logan, breathing heavily, glanced at Maya, pale, trembling, but alive. Rusty limped toward them, tail flicking weakly. The night that had begun in terror now glowed with searchlights and sirens. For the first time in years, Logan lowered his weapon, not in surrender, but in relief. 6 months had passed since that night in the mountains, the night of gunfire, sirens, and the burning shadows of the forest. Now sunlight danced gently across the surface of Willow Lake, calm and unbroken, as if nature itself had chosen to forget. The small lakeside town of Maple Hollow had grown fond of its newest residents, Logan Reed and Maya Collins, whose quiet presence carried stories people only whispered about. On the outskirts of town stood a large renovated barn, its red walls gleaming under the afternoon light. A simple sign hung above the door, Rusty's Haven, Rescue and Training Center. Inside, the sound of barking filled the air, not the fearful cries of strays, but the lively chorus of dogs rediscovering safety. Logan walked along the fenced yard, his posture still straight as a soldier's, but his steps slower, more grounded. His shoulder had healed, though the scar remained, a faint reminder of what he'd fought for. He wore a flannel shirt with rolled sleeves, and the faint stubble on his jaw caught the golden light. Beside him ran Rusty, his once-injured leg moving with only a small hitch in his stride. The silver-gray fur around his neck shimmered like armor. He stopped occasionally to check on the younger dogs, nudging one shy pup toward a bowl of water before looking up at Logan, tail wagging. Maya stood near the front porch, clipboard in hand, her hair now longer and lighter from the sun. The thin, frightened maid of the Doyle mansion was gone. In her place stood a woman, steady and radiant, though still quiet in her grace. She was teaching a volunteer how to handle a timid Labrador, her tone calm but firm. "They don't need to be fixed," she said softly. "They just need to remember they're safe." Her words, though meant for the dog, carried a meaning far deeper, a truth she had lived herself. When she turned toward the lake, she saw Logan watching her, and a small, knowing smile curved her lips. Inside the main building, Dr. Grace Miller worked in the clinic room, her sleeves rolled up as she checked a rescued shepherd's heartbeat. She looked healthier than before, her auburn hair tied back neatly, a faint silver streak glinting through it. Years of military service had left her hands steady under pressure, and her voice, low, deliberate, carried the authority of experience. She'd found a new purpose here, using her skills to heal rather than triage. "He'll be fine," she told a young couple adopting one of the rescues. "Just patience. They all come around in their own time." Grace had learned that too, that healing, whether of body or spirit, could not be rushed. At the far table near the window sat Mark Benson, the investigative journalist who had risked his career to expose Doyle's crimes. His lean figure bent over a laptop, the soft clack of keys filling the air. Mid-30s, sharp features softened by exhaustion, he looked more like a teacher than the man who had once confronted corruption at the state level. He was finishing an article titled "From Fear to Faith: The Story Behind Rusty's Haven." His words, now reaching millions online, had turned Logan and Maya's ordeal into a movement. When Logan passed by, Mark looked up with a half-smile. "You're a hard man to track down these days," he said. Logan chuckled quietly. "I've had enough of being found." As the afternoon faded, townspeople began gathering for the opening ceremony. Children played near the fence while the dogs barked in excitement. The air smelled of pine and fresh paint. A small stage had been built near the lake, decorated simply with ribbons and wildflowers. Maya stepped up to the microphone, her voice trembling at first, but steadying as she began to speak. "We built this place for second chances," she said. "For those who were hurt and forgotten, not just the dogs, but the people who love them. No one should have to live in fear. But everyone can learn to be loved again, even if it starts with one loyal heart." The crowd fell silent, some smiling, some wiping tears. Logan stood behind her, arms crossed loosely, his expression unreadable, but his eyes warm. When she turned to him, he reached for her hand. The crowd's applause rose like the wind over the lake. Rusty barked, trotting forward, his tail wagging proudly, as if he understood this was his moment too. In the fading sunlight, the three of them, the soldier, the survivor, and the dog, stood together, framed by the golden reflection of the water. Later that evening, as the guests drifted away and lanterns flickered along the porch, Logan and Maya sat by the lakeshore. Rusty lay between them, head resting on his paws. The sky glowed with the last orange traces of sunset. Maya leaned her head lightly on Logan's shoulder. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. Logan looked toward the horizon. "Sometimes," he said, "but then I look at this, and I know we made it worth it." She smiled faintly, whispering, "We didn't just survive, Logan. We built something." Rusty lifted his head, watching the water ripple under the dying light. In that stillness, peace finally felt real, not borrowed, not fragile, but earned. Miracles still happen, not always from heaven above, but through people and loyal hearts right beside us. Logan, Maya, and Rusty remind us that even after darkness, God can bring light, healing, and hope. If this story touched your heart, share it, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories of faith and kindness. May God bless you and your loved ones, and may His quiet miracles always find their way to your home.